The mental predator. All species that exist on our planet have a predator that feeds on them to survive, and we are not the exception. Although, as an evolutionary species, we are great predators of other species and even of our own species, we are also prey, and in this sense, we are not at the top of the food pyramid. The only difference is that our predator is on the mental plane and not on the physical plane. The writer Carlos Castaneda, in his book The Active Side of the Infinite of 1988, makes mention of the teachings he received from his mentor Don Juan Matus about the predator. According to Don Juan, we have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took control of our lives, making us its docile and defenseless prisoners. Interestingly, the invasion of predators would correspond to the time in which the biblical fall of man occurred. Through the mind, continued Castaneda, predators inoculate into the lives of human beings anything that is convenient for them, and they do it by playing with our self-reflection, which is the only point of consciousness that we have left, since, according to the seers of the lineage of Don Juan Matus, the human being works with his point of assemblage fixed in the place of the misleadings of reason. This narrow margin of consciousness is where man is irremediably trapped by the mental predator. A testimony. In his letter to the Ephesians, the Apostle Paul of Tarsus wrote, "We have a fight, not against blood and flesh, but against the invisible governments, against the authorities, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the wicked spiritual forces in the heavenly places." Ephesians 6:12, New International Version. In the Christian tradition, we can find references to the mental battles we have to fight on an everyday basis against evil, as the one it is presented in this testimony of Paul. In his lecture, The Battle of Your Mind, Rick Warren in 2010 mentioned author Donald Gray Barnhouse, who wrote a book in 1965 about this same subject named The Invisible War, in which he mentions that a violent battle is raging around us 24 hours per day, and that this is the battle for our minds, and that this battle is vicious, intense, unrelenting, and unfair. He also quoted the Apostle Paul of Tarsus in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, affirming that for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds that could be mental blocks, worldviews, personal attitudes, and clay idols. I should say. And that, continues Paul, we must take captive, that is to submit, to bring under control every thought to make it obedient to Christ. New International Version. Is there a way out? The only way to transcend to a higher plane of evolution is to escape from the iron control exercised by the predator over our thoughts, since we are what we think, and with our thoughts we build our world. We do not see things as they are, we see things as we are, and this leads us to become what we see. And even more, what we are, because of its energetic and vibratory quality, magnetically attracts events, situations, and people that are similar to what we are. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, the great American and Armenian Greek master, thought that the evolution of man is the evolution of his consciousness, and that consciousness cannot evolve unconsciously. Also, that the evolution of man is the evolution of his will, and the will cannot evolve involuntarily. Furthermore, the evolution of man is the evolution of his power to do, and doing cannot be the result of what happens. The evangelist Luke recorded that Jesus once said to a disciple, "You follow me, and let the dead bury their dead." Luke 9:60, New International Version. Don Juan Matus revealed to Carlos Castaneda that all human beings have two minds. One is totally ours, and it is like a tenuous voice that always brings us order, frankness, and purpose. The other mind is a foreign installation, product of the predator. It brings conflict, self-affirmation, doubts, and despair. And through this voice, we are always ourselves, the center of the me, mine, the center of the world. But what is the benefit that the predator gets from all this? Its great benefit is our energy. It maintains and feeds on our energy and our negativity and our fear, and with it increases its power and its influence on our actions. Predators are masters of energetic and mental manipulation. They feed on low-level energies, fear, pain, negativity, without which they would die of hunger. Our predator parasite seeks to manipulate us like cattle to create low-level energies as their food. The predator works like our cell phones or our computers that through the search engines constantly spy on us and know our movements and our interests, constantly reinforcing them and making available to us alternatives compatible with our physical, mental, and emotional searches, our material ambitions, and our sensory attachments and desires. We live in an environment that is physically, emotionally, and mentally contaminated, and we live in fear of an uncertain, not certain future. Our thoughts are constantly saturated by all this information. A way out. It is imperative to cultivate mindfulness at all times, because with this quality we can manifest unconditioned thoughts and choose our intellectual activity with freedom. Right thinking has to do with living constantly and intensely in the present moment, in the here and now. For the ancient seers, this sense of the existence of human beings among other living beings is to develop and increase the consciousness of being. Carlos Castaneda in 1988 mentions that according to his teacher Don Juan Matus, the only way that predators do not affect us is to discipline ourselves. The only alternative that remains for mankind is to discipline itself. A position of total alertness, which is nothing other than discipline, creates such conditions in our attention. The highest meditation is to be aware of being aware. And if we cultivate this kind of attention, we cease to be tasty for those beings. In this case, they turn around and leave us alone. That discipline makes the shining layer of consciousness unpleasant to the predator. The bright layer of consciousness is like a tree. If it's not pruned, it grows to its natural size and its volume. If the predators do not eat our bright layer of consciousness for a while, it will continue to grow and strengthen. In order not to become food, one needs to change internally. Castaneda always have called this discipline impeccability. For Carlos Castaneda, impeccability can be defined as the optimal use of the energy available to us at all times, and internal silence is one of its most exalted tools. The Apostle Paul of Tarsus speaks of the need to be impeccable when he addresses the Ephesians, saying, "You were asked to divest yourselves of the old man, whose passions you are destroying, as this was your previous behavior, and you were asked to be renewed by the Spirit from within." Ephesians 4:22-23, New International Version. The action of recanalizing that energy is impeccability, and impeccability helps us to cleanse the bond that exists with our own spirit. A poetic testimony of a great Christian mystic and doctor of the Catholic Church, Saint John of the Cross, shows us through one of his poems how he managed to escape from the prison of the mental predators. And it is a great incentive for all of us about the possibility that we have to win a definite victory in the battle for our minds that we constantly fight in this world. His poem, The Dark Night, goes on saying, "On a dark night, with anxiety inflamed by love, O blessed fortune, I left, but none took note, being my house already calmed. I climbed the secret ladder in disguise, O blessed fortune, concealed by the darkness, my house already calmed. In the blissful night, secretly, that nobody saw me."